what's your opinion on looking at solar return charts?
So I find when I'm doing predictive work, if I'm doing a reading, first I look at transits, then I look at two different types of progress charts and the solar return chart. So I would say the solar return chart in general, as well as with the two different progress charts, what are referred to as secondary progressions and primary directions or solar arc direction. What I find to only be really relevant and important is when there's something exact that really stands out. So in solar return charts, if there's no like exact conjunction or square opposition, you can look at where the ascendant is, where the midheaven is, the house of the sun. That's all relevant. It will kind of indicate a particular theme for the year, as well as if anything in the solar return chart makes an exact aspect to something significant in the natal chart.
Kevin, can we just quickly, maybe we can pull up my solar return chart for this year, and then maybe for my next solar return, and just see what jumps out.
Oh, wow. So you have an interesting solar return chart for this year in that your birthday, so last year your birthday was when Mars, Uranus, and the North Node were all in tight conjunction. And they were both square to Saturn. And then your sun would have been widely square to that. And I think that would have been square to the midpoint. Yeah. So so Mercury and your sun were widely square to that, but then the midpoint of your sun and Mercury would have been in fairly tight square to this one.
I lost my job the day before my birthday.
Okay. Interesting.
It wasn't like a total shock because they were going to lay off like a quarter of the company. So it wasn't like some crazy shock. My entire department, got laid off. But yeah, so that kicked off my solar return.
Yeah, I want to kind of spend a second thinking about this because, just looking at it, you have what's also actually pretty significant in my opinion is you have Venus and the moon are in a tight square, and they're what's referred to as being mutually receptive, in that the moon is in Venus's sign and the Venus is in the moon's sign. So they're both dispositing each other. And then this whole group would also be disposited by Venus. So this group would be connected to that. If you were to go through the trail of dispositors, you would have the sun and Mercury dispositing, the sun's dispositing itself, Neptune's dispositing itself. But then the rest of the chart would go through this mutually receptive square, which then is also square or opposite Pluto. And then sextile, this group is sextile to Venus there. So, I mean, this whole kind of thing is connected. The sun's also in the 8th house. So typically in a solar return chart, something I've noticed is that when the sun is in the 8th house, so like the house that the sun is in, would indicate like that is perhaps the one thing I found to be most significant in the solar return chart is the house that the sun happens to fall in. So I would expect you to be experiencing 8th house energy this year, which you might perhaps have had more emotionally intense experiences, which if you've used them well, will have led to some sort of a transformation.
That 8th house energy, I could definitely connect.
Definitely is an 8th house type experience. The other thing that could be said to be relevant, so you could look at where the ascendant is, which I believe 3 degrees of Sagittarius would be your 10th house, I think. Oh, it might be your 11th house, and then your ascendant. So I think middle Virgo would be either your 8th or your 9th house. I think it's your 8th house. So then there's another kind of 8th house emphasis. And then the third thing would be that you have this group here, which would fall in the 6th house, which would place an emphasis on like sixth house matters, particularly in what would be pertaining to. So you got Mars, Uranus, North Node. North Node is like fulfilling some sort of higher purpose. Uranus also kind of carries that humanitarian spirit, but it's got that kind of erratic, unstable, cerebral quality. And then Mars calling you to kind of like take action and kind of do something different that's in alignment with your higher purpose.
I did begin working on these astrology videos with you.
Does fit, and Uranus loves astrology, so you're taking action to bring astrology into the world in a way that's in alignment with your purpose in your day-to-day life. Sixth house, I find to really kind of be like work, but it's like kind of work kind of wherever you happen to be. So it could be at home, it could be could be anywhere.
I also the previous year I had like kind of like health, nothing major, but just health issues that caused me like a lot of weight loss and things like that. And this year I really focused on trying to get my health back. And especially because I wasn't, since I had lost my employment, I was like able to focus on that. So
yeah. And so I read or learned that solar return charts become active roughly 3 months prior to your birthday, and perhaps even can continue after your birthday. So there's an overlap from one solar return chart to the next. Right. And so we can look at your upcoming solar return chart, which would be coming active like right around now. This all kind of stands out. Yeah. So where's 9 degrees of Pisces in your chart? I think that would be probably your second or third house. Well, your midheaven's at the beginning of Scorpio. So then your fourth house begins in the beginning of Taurus. It's probably your second, but your ascendant, I think, is at like in the middle of Capricorn.
Yeah, it is.
So you have big first, second, third, and 7, 8, 9 houses. So yeah, it's probably in your second house. So yeah, Saturn, Moon, conjunct, opposite, Mars, and Mercury, which are conjunct. So that kind of jumps off the page to me. Your birthday is also right when Venus has stationed retrograde. So that's also relevant, and Venus would then be squared to Uranus. Your sun's going to be squared to Jupiter. Those would be the things that kind of stand out to me. And so, it was a lot to kind of think about, and to really kind of unpack this whole thing. But Saturn, Moon, Ascendant conjunct kind of gives me this feeling of like, it looks like the Ascendant's also right on the midpoint of Saturn and the Moon, right around it at least. So yeah, that kind of gives me the sense of like, perhaps really like developing discipline, and you're also a Capricorn rising, so Saturn is significant to you in general.
I felt this like real, I guess, Neptunian kind of quality the past year, where it's like I'm a little like, where am I going? Am I, but then I'm kind of like trying to push myself to be more comfortable in not knowing where I'm going, and I'm just a little unsure of if that's like a positive thing. Like basically I'm breaking away out of my typical thinking of like, okay, I need that 9-to-5 job. I need that paycheck. I need, you know what I mean? And like doing things in this traditional way and having this feeling of security around certain types of employment. And I'm trying to break out of that. But at the same time, I'm like, am I just digging a big hole for myself? Like, you know what I mean? Like that kind of energy where you're like, am I on the right path or am I not?
I mean, yeah, it feels to me like almost like integrating the energy of like Neptune and Pisces like into your being is going to be kind of part of your journey for this year. Really kind of finding your intuition, your feeling, empathic sense, activating your creativity and your empathy and all of those things. Neptune and Pisces are going to be part of your journey this year. And then having that whole thing opposite Mars and Mercury, it feels like at the same time learning to kind of be to be active and perhaps like what we're doing here to like get your stuff done.
Yeah. And that probably is like breaking out of this, typical employment. It's like, okay, if you want to do your own business and if you want to create your own career, you have to work at it. Nobody's going to tell you this is due on Tuesday. And
yeah, you also have the sun and 2 personal planets in the 6th house. I think Venus, let's see, is on the midpoint kind of widely. Yeah, it's within a degree of the Sun Mercury midpoint. It's also retrograde, and it would have just stationed retrograde, so it's still stationary. So it feels like if Venus, what I understand, Venus in a woman's chart will indicate her female friends and also how she carries herself and presents herself as a woman. It feels like that also kind of fits with this theme of kind of like remaking your identity.